Hello, this is Nathanael Larochette from The Night Watch, and you're listening to Sonic Perspectives.
Hello and welcome to another interview from Sonic Perspectives. I'm Samantha Buckman and I'm here today interviewing Nathanael Larochette, guitarist and co-founder of The Night Watch. I want to start off by talking about an album that's gotten some serious attention these last few months, and this would be none other than The Night Watch's third album, An Embarrassment of Riches. So, Nathanael, this album has been labeled with so many different genres, and I figure this is a pretty good place to start. It's been called progressive rock, metal, folk, just to name a few. In your own words, how would you describe the sound of the album and the band as a whole?
I think that the word cinematic is something that I use a lot. I think that there's definitely, especially with this album being a concept record, I think cinematic would be a good descriptor. And with a heavy influence from progressive rock and metal, as well as a bunch of other things. But I would definitely say cinematic, progressive metal. But it has been very interesting to hear different people interpret it in different ways, and which I think is great. I think it's nice to see people kind of struggle to define it. I think that's a real, I don't know, I think that's a strong quality of the record.
So, if people are labeling it with all these different names, what was the group that you were really looking to appeal to with this album? Where did you really want it to land?
I mean, we're huge prog fans as well as metal fans, so somewhere I guess we wanted to appeal to both kind of camps, and it is. I have found it interesting over the years that to notice that there tends to be a divide sometimes between people that are into just metal or people that are into strictly prog, and so it has been interesting because I think sometimes maybe some people who are purely into metal may think it's not quite metal enough, or maybe people that listen to prog maybe find it a little bit too metal. So I think the goal was to appeal to both, and I think in some cases we appeal to both, and in some cases we appeal to neither, maybe. But I think the goal was to. But for us as fans of progressive music and as fans of metal, I think it was trying to contribute something unique to progressive metal, and I think that to achieve that you kind of have to go to the fringes a bit and try to start mixing in new things and experimenting, so that it doesn't just sound like what people may expect an instrumental progressive metal album to sound like.
How much was that intentional? Were you ever trying to dial back to fit it into that idea that you wanted a little bit of prog and a little bit of metal? Or did you just kind of let it grow on its own?
Yeah, we really just let it grow on its own, and really I mean, first and foremost, and I think a lot of artists will speak to this, but we wanted to create something that was interesting to us, and I think that in the realm of progressive metal, there's a lot of amazing technical stuff, but I was kind of finding that there wasn't enough technical instrumental metal with classical guitar in it, or with some folk, or maybe with some jazz, or I was really, I mean, we were really trying to just throw in the genres and the influences that worked with us, and trying to hopefully do it in a way that was unique. And I think that this has been something we've been trying to do since our first record, but it really feels like we sort of found our voice on this one, and we were able to kind of weave it together. But really, ultimately, and I think a lot of bands do this when you're in the jam space, and you'll think of a riff or maybe a style from a band that you like, and you're like, oh, let's throw in this kind of thing here because we like it and we want to play it. But we weren't trying to make the most technical album, because I think there's a lot of technical stuff out there. I think really we wanted to try to, again, go back to that sort of cinematic style and really kind of tell a story through the music, without necessarily just relying on maybe being super technical or things that maybe people would expect in this kind of genre.
So you did just mention the story and the cinematic element a little bit, so I just want to loop back to the concept behind this album. Now, I've read a bit about it on your Bandcamp, but I really want to hear what the concept is behind this album in your own words.
Sure. So the concept, interestingly enough, we didn't actually set out to do a concept. We sort of just were writing songs, and the first song we worked on was the first song on the album, Land Ho, which our drummer had written. And so when he wrote this song, he said, okay, I picture this song being representing some explorers, heading out onto the ocean and going to find something, and then hitting a storm, and then crashing on an island. And then each subsequent song we wrote kind of unfolded from there. So generally speaking, the concept represents an explorer heading out to sea, crashing into a deserted island, and then while on the island, attempts to climb these mountains to sort of get some higher view, or gain higher ground, and kind of see what's going on. And on the mountain, they meet different characters and explore different things. And the whole concept is sort of, a metaphor for personal growth. But the beautiful thing about it is that, even within the band, we each kind of have our own endings, really, and we have our own kind of perspectives on the story itself. So I guess the best description would be it's a fluid concept album. So the setting is there with the island and the shipwreck, and the explorer kind of trying to make sense of the situation. And there are some kind of key elements and key characters that the protagonist does meet. But ultimately, even within the band, we still aren't really sure how it ends. We sort of have our own kind of ideas, and I think that's kind of fun, because it really sort of grew naturally just out of the music.
So you are mentioning the role that everyone in the band had to play, but I understand that you're co-founder of the band. But this isn't your only endeavor. You're also involved with another instrumental project, Muskox, and your solo project. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So how would you describe your involvement in both of these, and how they tie into the music that you do in the Night Watch?
Yeah, so I founded Muskox and I co-founded the Night Watch, and then on my solo music, I do that on my own, and it's with both kind of projects, I guess they sort of have their different kind of elements. So in Muskox, I play with the violinist from the Night Watch, as well as a cellist named Raphael Weinroth Brown, who currently is a member of Leprous, and also has a bunch of other amazing projects, one called The Visit, one called Camoncello, as well as he's releasing a solo album soon. He's an amazing musician. And so Muskox started solo, just me writing all the music. And then when I started collaborating with Raphael, we kind of found a relationship where I would write songs and then he would write string parts. And with the Night Watch, it was started with me and the drummer, Daniel Malma. And so we kind of started out kind of writing the music and sort of spearheading the vision. But for this record, it was very much a collaborative kind of process. So the writing was a little bit different, because with the last Muskox album with Raphael, it was very much I wrote songs and then Raph wrote string parts. We didn't really jam that much to figure out the music, whereas with the Night Watch and with this album in particular, there was a lot of collaborative jamming and throwing ideas around. So it's kind of two different ways of writing, which kind of yield their own sort of unique music.
How long have you been playing guitar? I mean, you're a part of 3 projects. You're already an incredibly accomplished musician. So how long has this been a part of your life, and what really got you started?
Actually, it's interesting. I was looking through an old journal of mine from when I was a teenager, and I think I got my first guitar exactly 17 years ago, give or take a few days. So I'm 34 now, so I got my first guitar when I was 17. But previous to that, I had played classical violin as a child for about a decade, or maybe like 11 years. So music's kind of always been in my life. As a teenager, though, I sort of got a little bit – I was having a hard time connecting with the violin, because at the time I was skateboarding and listening to punk rock, and I didn't quite feel connected to classical music. So I ended up quitting. But then a few years later, my older brother encouraged me and my younger brother to pick up the guitar, because we were getting heavily into metal. And so, so I've been playing guitar for about 17 years. It took a few years for me to really decide to take it seriously. And when I decided to take it seriously, I started taking classical guitar lessons. And that was really when I decided, okay, I want to get as good at this instrument as possible. And that really laid the foundation for my playing style. And with Muskox, it's so far it's just me playing classical guitar. But with the Night Watch, we weave in some classical guitar, but I also play some electric. So, music has been in my life since I was very, very young. And the journey has just been sort of interesting to get to this point. But I felt like once I started doing the finger picking and the classical guitar, very much influenced by Michael Eickerfeldt of Opeth, that's when I really kind of found an avenue for me to express myself in music. So yeah, so as of a few days, I've been playing guitar for half my life, which is kind of crazy to think about.
And it seems you've kind of come full circle, starting with your violin and then moving into heavier stuff, and now you're back here with all of these very string-based instrumental projects.
Yeah, I know I definitely have thought about that and find that very interesting. And I'm pretty sure I've sent those projects to my old violin teacher because I sort of felt bad because at the time I was a bit, I was a bit of a disgruntled teenager, and violin lessons, we used to drive an hour on Saturdays into the nearest largest city. I grew up on the east coast of Canada, and we were in rural Nova Scotia, so we used to drive to Halifax, which was an hour away, for violin lessons on Saturday, when I just wanted to kind of go skateboarding. So I know that for her, I may not have been giving my best effort, but we're friends on Facebook, and I think she sees that I've kind of kept going with music, and myself and the violinist Evan Runge, we've been playing music since 2006, even before the Night Watch. And so it's kind of funny that I played violin all growing up, I quit, and now most of my albums have violin or cello on them.
It's really great to see that passion continuing through, but it seems that your passion doesn't just include playing music now, it's writing music. You're really involved in songwriting. So when did you really start writing music, and how did you get from that beginning point to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, when I was 20, I quit university after 1 year and decided to just focus on music and just see what I could do. I mean, at that time, I had only been playing guitar casually for a few years, so it wasn't like I had played in bands in high school and I had already written songs. Like, I really was very, very green to the instrument. But while I was in university for that 1 year, I met a professor who also taught classical guitar. So when I quit university, I decided to study with him privately for a year. And pretty much from the beginning, I started kind of just playing little riffs. I mean, it started off by just, like anyone, you're trying to learn other people's songs, and then along the way you kind of take a riff that you learned and try to change it a little bit and make it your own. And so, yeah, it was around in 2005 when I actually was when I first moved to Ottawa to just kind of pursue music, to the best of my abilities. That's when I decided to start writing. While I was doing classical guitar lessons, the professor I was working with was kind of teaching me repertoire and kind of not shaping me, but inspiring me to kind of go and study in university. And it was kind of interesting because after about a year of lessons, I had learned enough classical guitar that I could go and study it privately or formally. But at that moment, I was kind of getting flashbacks of learning classical violin. And then I really realized, I really want to just write my own music. I've always been a fan of albums since I was young, getting punk rock cassette tapes and getting my first CDs. I love albums, and for me to make my own album was really the dream. And from the beginning, I realized, I don't think my path is to go to university and, be the best classical guitarist who plays Bach the best or interprets that kind of music the best. I just realized, that wasn't my path. My path was to try to express myself and find my own kind of unique voice in music. And yeah, I mean, it's been about 14, 15 years of that kind of journey beginning to this album coming out. And it's really kind of neat because when I look at this album and I look at all the metal that I was kind of listening to as I was growing up before I even picked up the guitar, I see kind of all those influences just kind of coming through. And yeah, it's kind of crazy to think it's been that long, but yeah, that was sort of the beginning. I just wrote some little riffs, tried to piece some little songs together. And then, the classical guitar was good because along the way I was able to get better technique and sort of get inspiration from different sort of eras of music. But, yeah, I realized, I want to make albums, make records, make as many as possible, make them as best as I can.
You make it sound a bit like you had an epiphany. I'm sure there was some artists or maybe even a band that really inspired you to break out like that. What were your biggest influences at the time when you really decided to start pursuing this creative path?
Yeah, I mean, Opeth was always a huge influence when I was a teenager. Actually, before I started playing guitar seriously, I actually was doing some music journalism, and I actually got to interview Michael Lakerfeld when I was a teenager, and my cassette recorder malfunctioned, so it was a real tragedy for me. But Michael Lakerfeld and Opeth, were a huge influence on me and my style of playing, and especially when you listen to an Embarrassment of Riches, you can hear that influence definitely in a lot of the way we play our chords and, abrupt moments that go from heavy to acoustic. Opeth really kind of pioneered that. And so that influence is there. Also, a metal band from Portland, Oregon named Agalock. I guess they kind of fall into the black metal category or folk metal, but they're definitely, in my eyes, a progressive band because they were really kind of blending these different elements of post rock and folk and black metal and just doing something really unique. And they were one of my biggest influences as well. And it's kind of crazy because I actually got to know them over the years and actually got to play some acoustic interludes on their final album, which was a really crazy full circle moment. And so definitely them. I was listening to a lot of power metal back when I was a teenager, a lot of Blind Guardian. They were actually, yeah, speaking of epiphanies, Blind Guardian for sure was an epiphany for me when I was a teenager, and specifically the song Time, What Is Time? I remember hearing that song, and it starts with this kind of classical guitar riff that then goes heavy, and I still remember the moment hearing it, and it just kind of floored me, and it's kind of interesting that now I've kind of taken that influence. But yeah, also around that time, I got really into the band ISIS from the States and their album Panopticon, which is still one of my favorite albums ever. Yeah, a lot to mention, but definitely Opeth really kind of set the foundation for my style of guitar playing.
Would you say that you still listen to a lot of those same artists now?
Some of them, yeah. It's kind of interesting because I think like anybody who's been into a genre for a long time, I've been a metalhead for a really long time, and so as you listen to metal for a long time, you kind of have your favorite albums, and and as I've listened to metal, I've branched off into other kind of genres and kind of explored other sort of things. So I still listen to metal, but I find like for a metal album to really grab me nowadays, I feel like it needs to have something extra, something kind of special. Like if I feel like the band has maybe done this already, I maybe won't be as drawn to it. But I do find that recently there have been a lot of amazing metal bands that I've been a fan of for a long time that are doing new and exciting things. Like Blind Guardian just released a crazy symphonic album, which is just a huge album that I've really been enjoying. Tool just released their album, which is amazing. Devin Townsend also is. I should have mentioned Devin Townsend. He's always been a big influence, especially being Canadian. I really admire his work. There was also a band called Disillusion from Germany who released an amazing album back in 2004. And then just recently they released kind of a comeback album called The Liberation, which is amazing. So yeah, I mean, some bands I kind of keep following. Others I sort of like maybe branch off from. But I mean, it's kind of like that with music. We sort of, especially when you have bands that have had really long careers. Sometimes, you have your favorite era, and especially a band like Opeth who've changed their sound a lot and kind of explored new kind of things. It's easy to kind of be in love with the albums that you listen to as a teenager. But I admire them for progressing and doing their thing. But yeah, there's certain bands that I always go back to. One band in particular, Moon Sorrow. They're like a Finnish progressive Viking metal band or progressive folk metal band. And they're a band that every album they release, I'm absolutely in love with. And they're also a huge influence on the Night Watch. Yeah, so much music. It's hard to keep up.
It is, and that's why I'm glad that I was able to catch your album. Because here you are talking about all these new and exciting albums that come out and bands that keep doing something different. And I hope you know that you're talking about yourself.
Thank you. Like that's one of the best compliments I can hear, like that's definitely something that drives us, like I don't want to make an album that is good for the city that I live in or the country that I live in. Like when I listen to Devin Townsend or Tool or Opeth, I want my albums to, I'm striving to be in that conversation, be on that level, hopefully, and so for people to even to see, the Night Watch named on Sonic Perspectives as one of the top prog metal albums of the year, right next to Tool. Like to me, that's incredible because, I think any musician that is taking it seriously wants to be, wants to try to live up to their influences and the bands that inspired them, and to see, my little album cover next to, Devin Townsend or Tool or Opeth, it's, that's really amazing. So thank you so much for saying that, because, that is what we're trying to do with this band. And that is what I've been kind of striving to do with music, is try to do something that is unique, stands on its own, but also can be recognized as high quality, and I mean, as a musician, you're always, I think a lot of musicians are, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I think I always feel like, I'm always going to fail to live up to the bands and the albums that I love, but, it's still worth trying.
I suppose as an artist, it's easy to be critical of your own work. So obviously you've had a lot of really positive reception from this album. How do you feel about it? Do you feel good about how the album turned out? Is there any thing that you wish that you would have done different?
Yeah, I'm very, very happy with this album. But yeah, we worked really, really hard on it. We spent a lot of time on it, but I I find it still really enjoyable to listen to, and I'm very happy that it's out, because it did take such a long time to finish. So it's a relief that people can hear it now, as something new, as something fresh. Whereas for us, it represents, nearly a decade of work. But I don't know. I don't think I listened to this album and think, oh, I wish we would have done things differently. I feel really, really happy with it. And I mean, there's always ways to improve. So, we're going to carry that into the next. But, when you work this hard on something and people hear it and they give you positive feedback, I'm not going to sit here and say, people's reactions, I don't really pay attention to them, because no, I actually do. Like, I want to know that people are hearing it, especially, I want it to be a gift to prog fans, because I'm a prog fan and I love when I hear a new album that's exciting. And so when I hear prog fans saying, or metal fans saying, oh, this is really exciting, or if a fan emails me and says, oh, this is really unique, I listen to a lot of prog metal, I haven't heard something like this. Like, to me, that's awesome to be able to create that feeling for somebody else. That's the ultimate, I think, in art, because I mean, even as I'm talking to you, I'm just looking at my CD collection, and I'm just thinking of just the thousands and thousands of people and artists and producers and musicians that have just, put all of their life and all of their effort into making something, and they may never know that it's just sitting here, but every time I look at it, it brings me joy. Every time I listen to it, it brings me joy. And so, that was our goal with this record. Like, we wanted to make something ambitious, make something that would leave an impact, that people wouldn't hear and say, oh, okay, sounds like this, sounds like that, whatever. We wanted to make something that people would say, oh, okay, like that was a statement, and I think that, when you're talking about would you do anything differently, like I don't feel like I would do anything differently, but I definitely see this album as, a very, very big statement. And, we're already working on new music, and I'm looking forward to kind of tightening things up a little bit, and making an album that maybe is a little bit more concise. But, I think in prog, there is the tradition of, in prog, a lot of albums are very big, but, when you look at a lot of prog bands, they always have to reach, there's always that moment where they do something really, really ambitious and take it to another level. And this was us attempting to do that, with this album. And, when you're reaching, I don't think you can necessarily get there, but just the act of reaching and pushing it as far as you feel that you can, I think that's what can yield, special results.
And so you did mention ambition, and this is certainly an ambitious project. You've brought this album, which is well over an hour of music, and it manages to flow as a single work of art through that entire 70-something minutes. How did the songwriting process have to happen for it to flow so smoothly? And how did the recording process end up being conducive to something so, I guess, large and grand and majestic?
Two of the songs our drummer had written kind of beginning to end. So those ones were songs that we kind of learned as a band and then sort of put our own flavor on it, each musician. But yeah, I mean, it was just a lot of time in the rehearsal space, just, okay, here's a riff. Okay, let's do it this many times. Okay, let's change it. Let's see, it was never like, let's do a 15-minute song. We just kind of organically sort of wrote it out, and we definitely scored everything so we could keep track of all the riffs and, and see and kind of look at the arrangements on the computer and do some editing. So a lot of the writing process was involved a lot of just notating things so we could kind of just keep tabs on it. And, it was really just a process of exploring and just building songs and piecing riffs together and trying it out a million times. And then also, since this album took so long, we've been playing these songs live for many, many years. So that's been a real process as well of just kind of like getting to know the songs and trying different things out. So in terms of the writing, I mean, yeah, I think there's not really writing isn't that glamorous. It's really just kind of chipping away in the workshop and just trying to piece things together and see if they work and see if they don't, and chopping them up and trying a different kind of thing and flipping it around. And, I was speaking of Tool recently, and like when I listen to interviews with Tool, this is a legendary band, but when I hear them talk about writing, I feel like I understand because I understand that process of just taking an idea, trying it, going down this alley, then turning back, trying something else, and really kind of seeing what are the best combinations, And so a lot of the writing was like that. And it just kind of turned out being this very long thing. And then in terms of recording, I mean, yeah, it was a very, 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 definitely the most ambitious production that I've been a part of. And luckily, our second album, Boundaries, which was also a big track, it was a 36-minute song, that helped us sort of lay the foundation for this album. So Boundaries was kind of the warm-up in terms of recording. So we knew who we wanted to record with for this album. And so that was kind of great. I'm grateful that we didn't have to like go to a new studio and meet new people and try to hope that it works out. Like we already knew that the engineer Topon Das, who plays in the legendary band called Fuck the Facts, we already knew that working with him was amazing, and he would get the job done. And then the only difference was that we recorded some violin and auxiliary percussion with a guy that I worked with, Dean Watson, with Muskox. So, knowing that we were working with good people that we had a rapport with, that definitely helped the process. But anybody who does this kind of music will tell you, like, it's very, very tedious. It takes a lot of patience, it's just kind of like you're building a big structure, and you have to make sure that the foundation is solid so that everything else can stand on top of it. And it's, I personally really enjoy the tedium of being in the studio and just seeing the songs kind of come to life, but it definitely takes a lot of patience to get it finished. But once it's done, it's amazing to just kind of see it come to life, and then subsequently, people are able to enjoy it.
So you did mention adding a few things into this album and definitely kind of taking a different approach to it. So you're an instrumental project, but a couple of songs on this album actually use vocals, not necessarily singing, but saying words and a little bit of chanting. So was this like a natural decision, or was it something that you were hesitant about?
I think it was natural. I mean, in the first song, Land Ho, it's this kind of prog metal sea shanty kind of song, and Dan, our drummer, wrote that, and he from the beginning he was like, okay, the riff goes like this, and then we say hey. So we're like, okay, like we never said no, we never questioned it. We're just like, okay. And then doing it live, it just kind of became a thing that people could kind of join in on. And it's a little cheesy and kind of goofy, but it works. And I think that, part of prog is to not take yourself too seriously, because the music can be very serious, and it's important to have a sense of humor. And so, and then with Dance of the Mountain People, the kind of jazzy folk kind of interlude song, that was a piece that I had written. I had sort of the two parts, and then Dan, our drummer, had this idea of just writing this kind of barbershop a cappella thing. And yeah, I was always like into the idea. We were just kind of nervous because originally he had suggested that we all sing it, and I was a bit nervous because it was if when you listen to it, it's a really intricate and very difficult vocal part. And I was worried that if we could be able to do it. And luckily, we have some friends that, it was actually two people, a friend of ours and then somebody that he brought into the studio. And, thankfully, like they were able to pull it off. Yeah, I mean, I think that again, I like to think of prog as, you know, I like to be surprised in music, you know, and I think that when that kind of shows up, you know, people wouldn't necessarily think that a prog metal album should have a barbershop kind of part in the middle of a jazz song, you know. But to me, that it didn't really take any convincing, because it just sounded good, you know. Like I think if it was a poorly written part or the singing was bad, then like that'd be another story. But it just kind of worked, and it did sort of add an extra kind of thematic element, and you know, and just something kind of unexpected, especially, you know, for such a big album. You know, you want to try to keep things interesting. So I think those vocal parts were nice, and for the Land Ho song, we were able to get 9 friends in the studio all chanting "Hey," and that was pretty fun.
Well, unexpected sure seems to be the name of the game, because certainly you don't hear the words prog metal, sea shanty, jazz, and folk used to describe the same work of art.
Yeah, I guess not. I mean, maybe we should hear that more.
So you worked with some friends, you worked with some other vocalists, but from what I understand, that's not the only people that you've had the opportunity to work with on this album. From what I read, the mastering was done by Alan Duche, who has some pretty impressive credits. What was it like working with him?
I mean, he's a consummate professional. I mean, he was just very easy to work with. Like, you know, he's done so much different stuff, and that's part of the reason why we did want to work with him, because, you know, he's done a ton of metal, but also, you know, he's done some folk and some classical and some more subtle kind of things. And so, like he did this one record called Sun and Moon by this harpist named Timber. And so when I saw, he did this like really delicate and beautiful and powerful classical album, but then he's also done Dillinger Escape Plan. It's like, okay, like he understands this wide range of sound. So working with him was awesome and very smooth. And yeah, like it was a great process, and it's neat to be able to have his name on our album.
So could you tell kind of the influence from his other projects on your work? Or was he approaching it as something entirely new?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell because, you know, again, it's just email communication. And so I think that from other mastering engineers that I've met, I mean, it seems that, yeah, I mean, in the past mastering engineers I've worked with, I think it's in their benefit to treat each thing as a unique project and obviously bring in their own skills. But I mean, yeah, it's like I think that with somebody like him, you know, he knows that he's getting the job because he has a ton of experience, and we trust his experience, and yeah, and he definitely delivered. It's hard to quantify, you know, how that influence affects our music versus how it influenced another band, but ultimately, you know, when you're working with somebody at that level and that professionalism, it's you're going to be happy with it.
I'm really glad to hear that worked out so well for you, because it seems like a lot of the people that you worked with on this album ended up contributing something stunning. And that takes me to the next person that you've worked with, which is the artist Alice Duke, who did the cover for the album. And I just have to say, the album cover is absolutely stunning. It's so deep and so full of color. Do you feel that it's a faithful interpretation of the concept and the emotions behind the album? How do you feel about it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I love it. And when I see it online, like it just grabs your attention, you know, and it's really subtle, and it's really, there's a kind of there's so many layers to it, you know. And so, yeah, we're all thrilled with it. And it's funny because, as we were working with her and she was sending sketches, it's really, really difficult to gauge where something's going to go based on a sketch, because I'm not that visually minded. So, you know, we were saying, okay, there's an island, there's a boat. So she was sending us, you know, a sketch, just like a black and white sketch of the mountain and a boat. And, you know, it's hard to know where it's going to go from there. So you just have to have faith. And then I just remember, like, she was sending us each time. It's like, okay, first it's black and white, then a little bit of color. And I remember one of the new revisions that she sent, one of the new versions of it, I saw it and I knew, I was like, okay, it just was such a huge leap from before. And then from there, it just got better and better. And a lot of people have commented on it. And yeah, I'm glad that people are liking it. Again, it's such an important part of the package, and I think that, we've all had that experience of just seeing an album cover and it just represents this world that you want to dive into. And I think that this is a perfect depiction. And, she also did artwork for each of the individual songs that you can see in the digital booklet. And we're also going to be printing some physical merchandise with which will have those art pieces as well. But yeah, she did an amazing job. We actually picked her because of a layout that she did for a band called Cormorant, and they did an album called Dwellings. And it's this amazing like tower with this snake wrapped around it. And when you open up the digipack, the panels just kind of stretch out and you can see the whole thing. And there's a real kind of fantasy element to it. It also kind of has this kind of video game quality to it, which I personally really like, because yeah, there's just this sense of adventure to it. And obviously it's a fine line, right? You want it to be kind of fantastical and have this sense of adventure, but also don't want it to be kind of cheesy and sort of campy. So yeah, we're super thrilled. And, we're going to be printing some vinyl, and I'm just looking forward to actually seeing it on a physical piece of merchandise, nice and big, because there's so many little details and little secrets that are a bit difficult to see, just when you're looking at a small picture online. But yeah, she did an amazing job. I'm very, very happy, and I'm glad that you're enjoying it as well.
You're right. It really just grabs you right away. You pretty much fall into it when you see it.
That's the goal. Yeah. That to me represents like a good album cover, and I mean, there's too many that I could even name, but I actually remember when I was a teenager, this was before I even got into metal. I was at a CD store, and I remember picking up a Blind Guardian album, not even knowing anything about metal, and just seeing this cover. I think it was Somewhere Far Beyond. And it's just like these minstrel guys, like in the woods, and it's all dark, but like they have this weird glowing orb, and then behind there's like these kind of orc like dudes, and I just remember looking at it and just being stunned. I was like, what is this? Like, there's music that sounds like this, like what? Like, and yeah, and I think that's, and again, and especially with the prog genre, I think that there's such a history of of unique and beautiful and immersive kind of album covers, and so yeah, we definitely wanted to keep in that tradition. Also the tradition of just not putting any writing on it, because I think any writing would have just taken away from the album cover.
So the album cover is cinematic. The music is cinematic. Now, how do you plan to deliver something like this to a live audience?
I mean, like I said, we've been playing these songs live for many years. Obviously, when you're in the studio, you can add some extra layers, extra layers of strings. I mean, I think that with this kind of music, we can faithfully deliver it live. But I think that on record, right, you can, instead of, if I'm playing live and I'm switching between a heavy and a clean part, the clean part isn't going to be a classical guitar or a steel string guitar. It'll be just me playing my electric, so it's going to be a bit different. But I think that the album is really kind of the feature length kind of film, and I think live it becomes something a bit more raw and a bit more immediate. So I think that the two experiences are definitely complementary. We're definitely comfortable doing that, but it's definitely challenging.
What band would you love to tour with someday? You could pick the bill. You open for them. Who is it?
Probably Devin Townsend. Yeah, Devin Townsend is just like, when I graduated high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I just took a year off. And at that point, I was doing some music journalism. I had my guitar. I wasn't playing so much, and it was around that time that I got really into his music. And I've been following him for like 15 years now, and just his whole career. And he's always been such an inspiration. And so to share the stage with Devin Townsend would really be a dream come true. His influence is also a big part of an Embarrassment of Riches, and so definitely Devin Townsend. I mean, Opeth as well. They're huge influences. So sharing the stage with them, but I'd have to give it to Devin Townsend. Like, as a fellow Canadian, it's always it's interesting to me, because when you see his career and people in Canada don't really know Devin Townsend. I feel like Devin Townsend should be like you know, just a musician that everyone in Canada knows and has an opinion about, but doesn't necessarily have to like. It's just I just feel like, oh, Devin Townsend, yeah, we know who that guy is, like Brian Adams or something. Maybe he's not as popular, but I just feel like, I joke with my friends. I say, when all is said and done, like I'm going to start the Devin Townsend Preservation Society and I'm going to lobby the government to make a stamp of this man because like his influence and his body of work is just so staggering. And he's such a, just an unassuming person. I'm not sure. Maybe you've interviewed him. I don't know, but yeah, I just admire his creativity and his versatility. And I mean, again, when you're talking about the album, and you're saying, oh, your album is prog and metal and jazz and folk, I don't describe that often. It's like, I'm looking at my Devin Townsend collection and I'm like, oh yeah, he does all of that, and that's, that kind of versatility is something that I really, really, admire in his catalog.
So, what do you think is the future of the Night Watch? Like, where do you see yourself going next? This project is massive, it's getting a lot of attention. Where are you going from here? Are you thinking about another concept album, trying something new? How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like this is our sort of debut in a way. Like I feel like we've done two albums before and we've gotten some good press, but I feel like this one, it appeared on some year-end lists, which is really awesome considering how amazing prog metal is and prog is at this time of year, like or at this time in the history of the music. Like there's so much crazy stuff. So it feels like this is kind of our introduction, even though we've been a band for over a decade, and so that feels good. It feels nice that people can finally or people are actually kind of just getting to know us through this record. And so moving forward, I mean, this album took a long time to make, so we're definitely looking towards making just new music. I was working with the drummer the other day, and we already have two albums of music kind of sketched out, and I think that probably we're gonna try to do maybe an acoustic album. I think that would be a nice kind of follow up to this record. Just something, with this album being so huge and so heavy, doing something a little bit more intimate, kind of almost what's hinted at in the last track. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see how the music comes through. So definitely making new music. Again, we're an independent band, so we're trying to just do everything we can on our own, and so finding some sort of support along the way would be great. I don't know if that would take shape as like a label or maybe a manager. But finding a way to perform live more, try to perform internationally, because so far we've only kind of been in our own region. So that's kind of what we're thinking of as the next kind of step. Now that we've sort of created something that has been well received in the prog and metal community, we definitely want to try to make even better music, perform more, and just kind of see how it goes. Like you've mentioned, I have a lot of other projects, and also Raphael, the cellist in Muskox, he has a lot of other projects. So within our own community here in Ottawa, we've already released upwards of 10 albums or more of kind of this sort of progressive chamber classical metal prog kind of thing. So we've been discussing about finding a way to sort of unify everything, whether that's a collective or our own kind of label, but finding a way to bring everyone together so that when somebody discovers the Night Watch, they say, oh, look at this. There's a solo album. Oh, there's Muskox. Oh, okay. Raph, who plays in Muskox, also plays in Leprous. Oh, and Raph has a solo album. Oh, Raph has a world music album. And just finding a way to kind of bring everything under one kind of umbrella. That's been part of the discussion over here, because I think that ultimately I want to try to build something myself, even if that is maybe the more difficult road. But I mean, who knows, right? I think ultimately the goal is to just kind of keep making music and hopefully bring people to all the other affiliated projects that we have.
All right, well, I have one last question for you. Maybe this one's hard, I'm not sure, but you did mention that everyone in the band kind of took something different from this album. As a listener, I felt excitement, fear, anticipation. It was an entire journey listening to this album. How much of you is in that journey, and what do you see yourself taking from this album as your own personal story?
It's yeah, I see myself reflected in the main character, right? The main character is sort of in this situation, kind of lost, kind of scrambling, enjoying moments of beauty, moments of fear, moments of doubt, moments of self-reflection, and ultimately not giving up. And that to me is what I kind of take from this, because this album was, very expensive to make, took a lot of time, a lot of effort, but ultimately we finished it, and for me, this is kind of my love letter to prog and metal. This is me trying to give something back to music that has given me so much. And so that to me, that's what I kind of gather from it, right? It's been this, making this album was climbing this mountain, right? And there was a lot of moments of uncertainty and a lot of moments of fear and a lot of moments of euphoria and everything in between. And so the creation of this album was definitely reflected in the story and vice versa. And so, yeah, to me, this is just, it was just something that took a long time, was very challenging to make, and really kind of pushed us all. We didn't give up, and we kind of kept going. And so, yeah, for me, just the struggle and the climb, climbing to that summit, that's been really kind of reflected in this. And I'm just very, very grateful that we were able to complete it and that people are listening to it. And thank you for taking time out of your life to go on that journey here, that it was able to bring you something positive.
And thank you for taking the time to talk to me and give me some insights into your life as an artist and into this incredible album.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Sonic Perspectives. I was completely floored when I saw our album named as one of the top 15 progressive metal albums of the year. And so thank you so much for supporting an independent, unknown project. And I'm a fan of the site, and I'm very, very honored to be doing this interview with you. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. And not unknown for much longer.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right, folks, that was our interview with Nathanael Larochette of the Night Watch and Muskox. We just finished discussing their third album, An Embarrassment of Riches. Make sure you follow Sonic Perspectives on Twitter and Facebook, and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. We're going to leave you with a song from An Embarrassment of Riches. This is Shamaniac.